Hello, good morning everyone.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Fine.
Thank you so much for inviting me to come here. It's always a pleasure and as well as a privilege to be around people like you who think so open-mindedly and so progressive in your way of viewing the world. Unfortunately, that's not the case very often, and I wish there were many like you. And thank you for being the way you are. The topic for today is a little bit dry and abstract. Is what theologians do when they don't know what to do now. Let me say something about the piece in which I'm going to base my speech. In 2015, I was commissioned to write a response to an article that was published in the Journal of Interreligious Studies to commemorate the 10th anniversary of that journal. So I had to respond to a university professor from a well-known Catholic university. Her name is Dr. Amy Light, and she advocates a couple of points about pluralism and the pluralist age. According to her, we live in a post-pluralist age, and the pluralist hypothesis is no longer tenable. So I had to respond to this way of thinking and how she develops her arguments. So I began by stating my view, which is that rather than living in a post-pluralist age, I think we live in an age of increasing religious pluralism, increasing religious diversity. I use the term the age of interfaith relations or relationships, in which you cannot avoid the religious other anymore, an age in which segregation or isolation from the religious other is not going to work even if you try. So given that situation, I don't think that proclaiming the demise, the death of the pluralist hypothesis it corresponds to the way things are in reality. So I was basically saying that we should keep that hypothesis alive. We should take into account the criticism that many theologians have proposed against the pluralist hypothesis. But let me say, what is this pluralist hypothesis? Basically, a theologian, John Hick, he proposed to understand religions to the solar system. And he said that traditionally, before Copernicus, people thought that the Earth was the center of the universe and the sun would be around, would turn around the Earth. So similarly, many religious people have a tendency to think that their own religion is the center of the universe and all the other religions are somehow oriented toward or revolve around those religions. And John Hick, he proposed an alternative conception, which is instead of thinking about your religion as the center of the universe, think about the sun as the center of the universe, and all the religious planets are somehow sharing a common universe and receiving a common light source coming from that sun. So if you think about the solar system analogy, you have like three ways of thinking about religions. The first one would be the exclusivist hypothesis, which basically says that the sun irradiates its light only in one planet, and all the other planets are in utter darkness. That's the exclusivist hypothesis. And of course, that planet is the center of the universe. And everybody in other planets is supposed to come to the only true planet when there is only there salvation, and you have to join it in order to receive the light. Now, there is a more sophisticated hypothesis, which is not the exclusivist view, it is the inclusivist hypothesis. And this one says that, yes, you have the sun, you have this planet Earth, which receives the light directly from the sun, and yes, there is some light in other planets, but that light doesn't come directly from the sun. It comes as a reflection from this planet Earth. So it irradiates directly on this planet, and from this planet it irradiates on other planets. So yes, you find some degrees of truth, some degrees of goodness in other planets, but it's always a reflection of our own truth, our own goodness, which comes directly from the sun. I mean, you are laughing, but this is really serious. This is not a matter to joke around, because most theologians would fall within these two categories, advocating either the exclusivist hypothesis or the inclusivist hypothesis. And the lady that wrote that piece that I had to respond to, she basically advocated a post-pluralist age in which people had to advocate the inclusivist hypothesis, but with a more humble attitude. Somehow being out, I'm paraphrasing and trying to be fair and not trying to make a caricature of her ideas. And this inclusivist position is to be held, or to be held as a temporary measure, being aware of the limitations of our thoughts, our language. So my response was that we need to keep the pluralist hypothesis alive. I couldn't understand what she was trying to propose, because there are like two versions of inclusivism. One, which I call religiocentric inclusivism, which is the one that speaks about one planet as still being the center or the place where the sunlight irradiates directly. But that is a pre-modern, pre-Copernicus conception of the universe, so it's not applicable in the post-Copernican universe in which we live, right? So we agree that that's a pre-modern conception, and she advocates a postmodern form of inclusivism, the humble type of inclusivism, instead of the pre-modern, which is the more arrogant, more assertive type of inclusivism. And so we agree that mono-religiocentric path is no longer tenable. So the other one that is now growing, and that many theologians are advocating, is what I call pluri-religiocentric inclusivism. Now, this means that there are many galaxies in the universe, and all these religions are like different galaxies, and they are distant and different from each other, and they all have their own centers. So it is best to keep them separate and stick to your own galaxy, because there are no grounds, there are no bridges to compare, or even to have a fruitful conversation or dialogue with people from other religious galaxies. And this view, this pluri-religiocentric inclusivism, is what prevails nowadays in many theological circles. The pluralist hypothesis remains a minority position, is a growing position, but still is a minority. And if you advocate the pluralist view in certain theological departments of theology or seminaries, you are out automatically out. Right? There is no room for you if you believe in such a crazy idea that all the planets receive the sunlight, not necessarily in the same proportion, but they all receive it somehow directly. So anyway, so that's the pluralist hypothesis. Now, but John Hicks' conception has some problems. And one of the problems of John Hicks' conception is that he somehow suggests that no religion got it right, or no religion has full access to the reality, to the ultimate reality. And this is problematic because religions, they claim that they got it right, and all of them got it right. So you have to be careful what you say about other religions. So one of the accusations is that the pluralists, following John Hicks, somehow posit a new religious object beyond any of the religious objects that religions think are in a relationship with, or they are trying to worship. So that's one of the objections against the pluralism of John Hicks. But he speaks about another transcendent reality beyond the different ultimate realities found in different religions. But there are another problem with John Hicks, according to Amy Light, is that pluralism, the pluralist hypothesis, presents itself as the true worldview of the universe that somehow replaces the different worldviews of each and every religion. So it becomes an alternative religion in itself that competes with the worldviews that other religions propose. So you need to address these two objections and formulate a new pluralist hypothesis that is still is able to go beyond these concerns and these views. And that's what I propose in this short piece that you are welcome to read. It's available online for free. Just Google it and you will. It's a little dense, but it's very interesting, not because I'm saying it, or because I wrote it, but I really think that it's interesting. So what is this new formulation of the pluralist hypothesis? First, it is true that many people have understood the sun as being the same across religions, across traditions. And to be honest, we don't know if that is the case. So we have to be a little bit more humble about our claims, about whether or not the sun is exactly the same, or all religions are referring to the same reality, or truth, or whatever, right? This goes against the grain of Juju. I know, but it's good to hear that many people have a problem with this easy conclusion that all religions are basically teaching one and the same thing, or they are all referring to the same reality. That's something that is problematic and that has been criticized by many scholars and theologians. So a postmodern hypothesis does not make absolute or definitive claims about the nature of the sun. Different constellations, when they get together to talk, they have to come up with their own working definition of that sun, right? But they cannot assume that what they think about the sun is going to be exactly the same in other traditions. So the postmodern pluralist hypothesis does not speculate about the ultimate, absolute nature of the sun or the sunlight. That's something that has to be negotiated, talked about among different traditions in dialogue, and for specific purposes. And I mean, I'm not suggesting that the sun is the same thing as God. That may work in some traditions, but when you have, let's say, an atheist position and a theistic position, to speak about the sun and what everybody has in common is not really very helpful, right? So you need another sun, which might be the concept of truth or values such as freedom, justice. That would be a better sun when you are dealing with a dialogue between atheists and theists, right?
Yeah.
So it is a mistake to assume that the sun always refers to God or a higher power or whatever. So we keep, or this hypothesis keeps the concept of the sun as a symbol, not as a concept. Now, a concept is something that you can define once and for all. But a symbol is not something that you can define. It's something that is polysemic, meaning it has different meanings to different people in different contexts. So that's what the sun of the pluralist hypothesis is. It's a symbol, not a concept. And specific traditions in dialogue or individually, they have to come up with their own formulation of what the sun might be in a particular case, in a particular context. Well, remember, the postmodern approach to pluralism. Okay. So, yeah, a symbol for what? You may be thinking, you may be asking. A symbol for, it's a functional symbol. It functions for what, symbol for whatever functions as the ultimate, as the most important, and that could be a truth, could be an ideal, could be a reality. So the only, not a definition, the only idea that share all these different conceptions of the sun is that it's something that functions as the most important, something that functions as the ultimate concern, if you like. And this is not a definition, because you are not feeling the content of what that, whatever functions as the most important. You are not saying it's a reality, you are not saying is, you are limiting yourself to talking about the functional reality or concept, but it's not. Now, this is not a common essence, meaning it's not something that is like a common denominator. That's a very common idea among former advocates of the pluralist hypothesis. There is no such thing as a common denominator. Traditions, religious traditions, and secular traditions are diverse enough, and they do not allow for a common denominator. I know that, again, this goes against the grain of what many people in places like UU, Unitarian Universalist Fellowships, believe, right? So no common denominator, not a monolithic reality. So it's like an empty X, right? It's an X, and you define it depending on the context and depending on the tradition. Now, another objection. So this somehow addresses the objection that speaks about positing a religious object beyond the object of religions. You are not positing anything with this formulation of the pluralist hypothesis. It's just a symbol that is not to be defined unilaterally or in absolute terms. So in a way, it allows you to go beyond the first objection. Now, the second objection, the one that says that pluralists advocate a new worldview that competes with other religions. That's not what pluralists do. Pluralists, they do not propose another metaphysical worldview that competes against other worldviews. The business of being a pluralist is not a new religion, is not a new worldview, but a new interpretation of specific traditions. a more humble approach to your own religion, a more humble approach to your own secular tradition. So you may have Christian pluralists, you may have Buddhist pluralists, you may have secular pluralists. So to be a pluralist has nothing to do with believing in something separate from what religions advocate. It has to do with how you hold your beliefs, how you hold your convictions in a way that respects other traditions, that takes into account what other religions have to say about themselves. So you're not in the business of imposing, oh, you say the same that we say. No, you have to listen first, and then you reach conclusions. And they do not say the same thing if you pay attention closely enough. And so that's why you need to study world religions more and more. And just an introduction to world religions is not going to be sufficient. Right? You need to go deeper and study harder to see that actually even within one religion, people do not say the same things. So how can you dare to say that all religions say the same thing? That's simplistic and doesn't do justice to the intrinsic diversity that you find in each and every religion. It's just shallow. Not all are the same, not all are advocating the same belief or assuming any common sound. Okay. Now, if this is the case, if religions are different, is there room for dialogue? Is there room for cooperation? Does it make sense to learn about other religions if it is the case that they are ultimately different? And the answer is yes, of course. Why? Again, think about the planets, the solar system analogy. Different planets, they receive light, yes, they have something in common with the other planets because they share a common sun, whatever that might be. But they receive the sun, number one, in different intensity. Not all planets are equally, or we do not have to assume that all planets are exactly at the same distance from the sun. Number two, what you see of the sun is not necessarily what others may see of the sun. Perhaps the window metaphor will be helpful. When I see things from this window, I do not have the same perspective of somebody over there has from the same panorama. From this window, I see this part of the panorama. Maybe from another planet, people will have a different perspective of that panorama, which again is a symbol, is open-ended symbol. The panorama, the sun, whatever way you feel, that X that you have in common with others. I know this is very dry and abstract, so precisely because you don't see the same things that others see, it makes sense to have a conversation and learn from others so that you may be enriched by these differences and you may expand your horizons, see things with a broader perspective that takes into account other perspectives, right? So to be a pluralist is to be open to expand your window, your knowledge about the sun and the sunlight, and that not in opposition but in relationship with other religious planets. Okay? I think I should continue a little bit or stop and give.
We can stop. I mean, there's plenty of time for discussion if you want to stop.
Okay. But before I conclude, now this is wonderful. This is very theoretical. So what? What do we do with this new hypothesis, this most postmodern formulation of the pluralist hypothesis? Of course, if you see the implications, you see that this is also a call for action. And usually when you have a theory, a view, it's not just to have fun and to entertain your intellectual taste, right? It is for the sake of doing something. So what are pluralists supposed to do with this new view, this more postmodern approach to the pluralist hypothesis? And here I would like to mention the Pluralism Project by Diane Heck from Harvard University. She has a wonderful website, and in that Pluralism Project you may learn about different religions, different traditions, but he has also a short description of what pluralism, what she means by pluralism. And I think that this is a practical approach to other religions that all pluralists should, this is my personal opinion, should share. She says 4 things, and I conclude with these 4, and then we have the conversation. First, she says pluralism, I would say the pluralist hypothesis is not the same thing as diversity. Pluralism is not diversity. Diversity is a given. Pluralism is not a given. It's something that requires, she says, energetic engagement with diversity. Just diversity is compatible with religious ghettos, with solipsism, with isolation. Pluralism is a process, it's something that you construct, it's something that requires you to engage energetically others. Number 2, she says, pluralism is not tolerance. It is something that requires you to seek understanding. Tolerance does not require you to learn from other religions, but pluralism does. You have to seek understanding, and you have to educate yourself. If you are a true pluralist, you cannot assume that all religions basically teach the same, so why should I care learning about others, right? That's the danger of this identist conception of pluralism. But this postmodern conception involves active learning, seeking mutual understanding. So number 2 is not tolerance, it's seeking mutual understanding. Number 3, it is not to advocate relativism, everything goes, everything is equally valid. No. Pluralism has to do with the encounter of commitments. You don't have to give up who you are when you are open and willing to learn from others. So, to be a pluralist does not require you to give up anything. On the contrary, it requires you to bring your commitments to the table of dialogue, to the table of cooperation. But you bring them in a way that is more open, more humble. So it's not relativism, everything goes, no. And this is number 4. Pluralism and the pluralist hypothesis, when applied to reality, it is not about preaching, about monologue, about just telling others what you think is right or the way to change things. No, it is about dialogue, and dialogue presupposes 2 ways. You give, you take, you speak, you listen, you criticize, but you are also criticized. So it is a process. So I think that this practical approach to pluralism fits very nicely with this hypothesis. Now, Professor Diane Eck, she's very smart, and she avoids this type of questions of truth and value, which are controversial. So she doesn't talk about the pluralist hypothesis at all. She just goes to the practical dimension. But in my mind, you cannot have one without the other, right? And you need the foundation for this practical approach. And unless you have this new formulation of the pluralist hypothesis, you don't have a good basis for your social action, your engagement of others. Thank you so much.